One night when I was 10 years old, I was woken up by my bedroom door opening, followed by the feeling of someone sitting on my bed. I felt my leg grazed and the bed sink under a person's weight. It's just Mom, I thought. But when I opened my eyes, it was in fact definitely not my mother. I was horrified at the person, or thing, that sat at the end of my bed. It appeared to be a little boy with no eyes. He had black, empty sockets where eyes should have been. He was about my age. He extended his hand toward me, and in it was a little box. I was horribly shaken, but reached out anyway. He pulled back. I reached for the box again, and with my voice shaking said, "Give it to me." Then I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and when I reopened them, he was gone. However, I could still see the imprint where he'd sat on my bed. Fast forward 5 years. My girlfriend came over to do homework together. After she finished, she fell asleep on my bed while she waited for her parents. When they arrived, I tried waking her up. She opened her eyes suddenly and gasped, startling me. She was looking up at the corner of my room where the wall met the ceiling. She pointed there, staring until she shut her eyes again, dropped her head back onto the pillow, and went back to sleep. I shook her again in an attempt to wake her. She then came to full consciousness, and I explained to her what she'd done. She had a worried, frightened look on her face. Up on the wall, I saw a little boy with no eyes. He was there in a Spider-Man pose, just staring at me, she said. I then freaked out and told her my experience from years ago with the same kid. Fast forward another 5 years. I was with the same girlfriend, and by this time we had had a 2-year-old. We were living in my parents' house. My daughter's room was my old room. I noticed that my daughter began waking up at the same time every night, and I could hear her talking. After a while, I realized that she had almost the same conversation every night. One day, I playfully asked her who she was talking to. She replied with, "It's a little boy. He's nice. He's lost and looking for his mommy." As this should not have been a surprise to me at this point, it was still just as horrifying. My daughter's nightly conversations continued until we got our own place later that year. I've had several paranormal experiences in my lifetime, but the scariest is this one. I was about 23 years old and working for a small, local-owned flooring company. My boss had rented out a big warehouse at the train depot area of Anchorage, Alaska, and it was a really old building. As you walk in, one of the first things you are met with is a giant, round vault door, about 6 feet in diameter to your left, that's really old and locked, an empty office in front, and a short flight of stairs that lead to the main warehouse area, where there is a rolling door on the complete other side of the warehouse. The power box was located on the wall across, so basically, I'd have to do a big triangle across an empty, almost pitch-black warehouse, other than dim backup lights every now and then that just made it creepier. My boss wanted me to go in, turn on the power and lights, and open the door for him. It was about 8 p.m., and we had a night gig to work across town, so we had to hurry and load tools and materials. He dropped me off at the front door, and I went down the stairs. Immediately, I began to feel creeped out and could not shake the sense that I was being watched. Trying to ignore it, I headed to the power panel. As I was about to take a look at it, I glanced down into the warehouse to my left for some reason, and swear, I saw a shadowy silhouette of what looked like a man standing partially behind a support pillar, just looking at me. My hairs stood up all over my body, and I quickly flicked the lights on. As I looked back, nothing was there. I was a bit freaked out now, so I hurried to open the door. We loaded the stuff in. My boss pulled out, and I closed the door again. As I headed back to turn off the power, out of my peripheral to my right, I saw the shadowy man again by the same pillar. I quickly glanced at it, but nothing was there. I ended up tossing it off as my mind was playing tricks on me. I turned off the power, and because I was creeped out, I fast walked to the stairs with my eyes darting side to side. I got to the stairs, and as I was putting my foot down on the first step, I heard a very loud smack right behind me. It was as if someone had clapped their hands really hard. Startled as can be, I booked it up the stairs. It wasn't long before I heard what I can only describe as someone with very heavy footsteps, wearing large boots or something, running up the stairs right behind me. I was so terrified at this point that I practically flew up the stairs and spun around at the top, ready to knuckle dust whatever bum who broke into the building. But the sound stopped. There was no one there. No one. Nothing. I then ran out of the door and jumped into my boss's truck. He saw me run out with a scared look on my face and chuckled. "See, that's why I had you go in there. That place is really damn haunted."
This is still the most scary paranormal thing that has happened to me, and I can't think of an explanation for it. So about a year ago, I was watching this Netflix series called Unsolved Mysteries. I watched the whole first season of it, but beside that, I never really thought too much about it. Anyway, one night I had this very vivid dream about an earthquake and tsunami in some city in Japan that was next to a body of water. In the dream, I was a part of this team that knew the tsunami was going to happen. However, we could not tell anyone what we knew or when it would happen. When the tsunami ended up happening, I was inside of a building that was collapsing, and this man, his wife, and 3 daughters were stuck on this balcony-like platform. The man called out to me and said, "Please, take my daughter with you." I grabbed his youngest daughter from him and somehow got us to safety as the balcony went crashing down with the rest of the building. I was then running along this dirty, wet, flat land with the little girl after the tsunami had hit. I came across the man again. He saw me and began asking for his baby daughter back. He explained tearfully that the rest of his family had not survived. I gave him back his baby girl, and not long after that, I woke up. I called my mom to tell her about this really weird dream. She tried to decipher it for me, but couldn't really come to a conclusion. A few weeks later, a new season of the show, Unsolved Mysteries, came out on Netflix. Happily, I began watching the new season. I was enjoying the show until I came across a particular episode. When I realized what the episode was about, I got chills down my spine. It was about a tsunami that had hit a small city in Japan. The episode featured reports of people claiming to be visited and haunted by the ghosts of those who had died. The ghosts acted just as they did when they were alive, not knowing they were dead. What was even more chilling, though, was that there was a particular interview with a man who said that he had lost his wife and 2 daughters in the tsunami. He further explained that his 3rd daughter, the youngest daughter, had become separated from the rest of them during the tragedy. However, he was later reunited with her, as she had apparently been saved by a stranger. I immediately turned off the show and called my mom, crying. I was scared as hell. To this day, I still wonder if this creepy experience meant something, or it was simply just a crazy coincidence. It was about 4 years ago. It wasn't the first paranormal occurrence to happen, just the one that scared me the most. One night, my 2.5-year-old son woke my husband and I up when he crawled into our bed. I couldn't fall back asleep, so I decided to work on a project in my craft room. I was in there for about 45 minutes when the small monitor to the nanny cams began rapidly flickering on and off. Mind you, these were not motion-censored cams, only continuous feed. The cameras were in the living room and our son's room. I went over to the monitor and picked it up. It all of a sudden made this loud, ear-piercing sound like a microphone feedback. It was quite startling, and I dropped the monitor face down. I noticed that the glow around the edges had stopped flickering. I picked up the monitor and turned to look at the screen and saw my son standing as still as a statue in the middle of the living room. He was just staring at the wall. I headed for the door with the monitor still in my hand when I glanced down again. My son's head sharply turned, only his head, and his eyes went directly toward the camera in the upper corner of the room. He stared blankly with no expression on his face at all. I left the room and went through our small kitchen and dining room and rounded the corner to the living room to find that it was empty. The door to our bedroom was on the other side. I went in there and my son was sound asleep in the same position he was in when I left the room. My husband looked up from his e-reader. I asked him if our son had left the room at all. He told me no. I then asked him if he had gotten up to go to the bathroom or kitchen, thinking maybe he just didn't see our son try to follow him. But my husband swore he hadn't left the bed at all since I left, and that our son had been peacefully snoring away the whole time. Like I said before, this wasn't the first time we had seen strange things around the house, but it was always so brief that you didn't really have time to get a full glimpse. However, this was different. It wasn't just a glimpse. Above all, it was the look on my son's face, that empty stare and the quickness when he turned his head to face the camera. Still, even now, talking about it gives me the chills.
I have had multiple paranormal experiences throughout my life. Almost none of those have even been unnerving, except for one. When I was 10 years old, I lived in Southwest Texas. It got so hot in the summer there that one day we literally fried an egg on the sidewalk. On this particular summer day, my mom had taken me and my friend to the library to check out and read some books. We had finished our reading and picked our books, so we decided to play around with the elevator. There were only 2 floors in the library, and we began to play a game where one of us would go into the elevator, and as soon as the doors closed, the other would race down or up the stairs and try to beat the elevator to its designated floor. I was waiting for the elevator on the 2nd floor, and as it dinged, my friend took off down the stairs. But as I stood there, the doors opened. I immediately felt uneasy. The elevator was full of about 8 or 9 people, but they were all looking up at the numbers inside it, staring unblinkingly. There was a man at the front, wearing a black 3-piece suit, gloves, a fedora, and holding a cane. Keep in mind, this was in Texas during 110-degree heat. He was gaunt, with a white mustache, and slightly resembled the guy in Needful Things. He smiled wide when he saw me, and said in a voice I'll never forget, "There's room for one more." I was totally freaked. No thanks," I replied. The elevator doors closed as the man sort of tilted his hat. As I stood there in shock, my friend came back up the stairs, slightly winded. "Hey, where were you?" he asked me. I explained to him I couldn't use the elevator because it was packed full. "There was nobody on the elevator," he said. I look back on this often, and the question, what if I'd gotten on it, haunts me. I have absolutely no clue what would have happened to me, and it is sort of frightening. I know how all of it sounds, but I swear to the higher power this really happened.